Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Wellness of Madness podcast. I am your host, Lorraine, and I am a health coach and a behavior change specialist. And today, we're going to be talking about cultural diversity and the tapestry of culture itself, as well as co-culture theory. And I'm so excited that by coincidence, this episode will be in your ears and in your eyes on MLK Day. So let's get it started. I have two incredibly special guests with me today. I have school counselor Iliana Alvarez and musician Dio Sabado. And I am so excited to start chatting with them about diversity, about culture, because they know plenty about it. So let's bring them on in. Hi, Dio. Hi, Iliana. Welcome to the Wellness of Madness podcast. Before we get started, and before I start asking you guys questions and who you guys really are so that the audience can know, I'm going to define something that we are going to talk about today, and that's culture, because there's so many definitions of culture. But I chose one that I think really, really shows essentially what that word tries to define. So culture is integrated patterns of human behavior that include language, thoughts, communications, actions, customs, beliefs, values, and institutions of racial, ethnic, religious, or social groups. That itself is a mouthful, but why it's really interesting, not only in our general life, but in wellness, is because, as you know, we live in a global economy, in a global world, and in United States, where cultural diversity should be celebrated, but it's not always that easy. So Iliana, let's start with you. Can you let us know what you do for a living and how you got to this career?
Yes, of course. So I'm a school counselor. I just actually began a new position this week, but I do have previous experience as a school counselor. And so the reason why I'm very passionate about this specific career is because I'm able to work with students who they come from very low economic communities, predominantly Latinx and African American students. And so just being able to support them, not just, academically trying to help them figure like a career pathway, but also helping them emotionally and mentally as well. And that's something that I'm just very passionate about.
I love it. That's why it's so awesome having you here. And congratulations on that, because she officially became a school counselor. And we know the path is long when it comes to education. So that is a really big deal. And Dio, let's go to you. You are a musician and we know you from Stray Rebel Bullet, but why don't you tell us a little bit more about that?
So it started when I was 9 years old, I guess. That's when I first picked up the violin. And from there, it was this huge little ladder of different instruments that I wanted to pick up and try. And I guess one of the instruments that really stuck to me was the guitar, the bass, and the viola. In fact, one of my greatest, I guess I'd call it my accomplishments. My school, I was thankful enough to have this opportunity where my school's band played the national anthem for the Giants in 2007. So it was Giants versus Colorado Rockies. And I was able to perform on the viola with the rest of the band, the national anthem there.
Very cool, Dio. So now you are a bassist for Stray Rebel Bullet, and I know that you have some other side projects as well. Let's talk about, what is your ethnic background? Do you speak any other languages? And where are I'm not sure if your parents are from the Philippines or if you were born there. So tell me a little bit about your background ethnically and racially.
Yeah, so I'm very unique. A lot of times when people see me, they question, like, what are you? What are you? And I turn it into a game sometimes. But to ruin the game, I'm part Filipino, part Japanese. I'm very up north in the Philippines. My parents are from a region called Ilocos, and it's a very, very beautiful area. It's basically the postcard area of the Philippines, where you get nice white beaches, nice mountains, a lot of the beautiful skies. And the Japanese part of me, I know very little about. I know my grandfather was Japanese. My mother was born in Hawaii, and my grandfather had this opportunity to move from the Philippines to Hawaii as a farmer. So he moved over there when he was 17 on a ship. And from there, he started building a family. He started building his own farm. He worked on a plantation for a majority of my mom's childhood. And my father was born in the Philippines. I was born here, thankfully, when they started moving around. So I don't know much of my cultural background, unfortunately, but I am able to experience a lot of the Filipino culture here in America, thanks to family.
What about you, Illy? Were you born here? Where are your parents from? And do you speak any other languages?
Yes, so my mom is from Jalisco, Mexico, and my dad is from Colima, Mexico, which is a neighboring state. Both my parents migrated when they were fairly young. My dad was 16, and my mom came when she was 20. She was actually pregnant with me, and I was born here in California. That's all I know about my history within my ethnicity. I do identify as Mexican American, and I do speak both English and Spanish.
Nice. Well, that's really, really intriguing because these are two nations that actually are very interconnected because the Philippines and Mexico were both taken over by Spain. Now, Philippines, it's nuts because you guys actually got taken over by Spain and then France and then United States and then Japan and then United States and then independency. So that's crazy. And I actually just found out too that during a certain period, the Philippines were were ruled by the viceroyalty of Mexico when we had the viceroyalty going on, which was not fun times, but but because of it, our countries are very alike in certain ways when it comes to architecture and everything else, as well as language, because Tagalog, one of the languages of the Philippines, obviously mimics Spanish in a lot of ways. But it's really interesting because when we come here, it kind of all like it's a melting pot, right? Everything just kind of melts together. So what do you consider Illy, what do you consider your culture to be? And how would you word that?
Yeah, so I think for me personally, culture can mean a lot of things. It can be your race, it can be ethnicity, it can be the languages that you speak. It can even go deeper into like what you identify with, like even the interests that you may have. And so for me personally, I like to celebrate both my Mexican culture and my American culture. I think for me, I celebrate my Mexican side a lot more than my American. For me, my Mexican culture really comes from like how I grew up in the household that I grew up and the values that my mom instilled in me. And then my American side, for me, it's more of like kind of like the privileges that I do have from being a citizen and being raised here in America and having those opportunities that unfortunately I may not have had if I was born and raised in Mexico. And so I think for me, just being able to celebrate those different sides and bring them together. Like you said, the melting pot, just bringing those cultures together, being able to celebrate them separately, bringing them together and yeah, just sharing it with everybody.
What about you, Dia? What do you consider your culture to be and how do you word that?
So for me, I feel like culture is a group of similar interests, customs, and beliefs and values that a person holds. And me personally, I feel like I'm very American in that definition of culture, but I also have the ability, or I also have access to my Filipino culture. So a lot of the Filipino food, art, music, karaoke is a big one. Yeah.
It's interesting because this is where it gets hard. This is where it gets interesting because we're very proud of where we come from. If we happen to know a lot about it, sometimes we don't, for one reason or another. And it sounds like you guys definitely do still have a little bit or a bit of that side. But it gets crazy when we maybe have to deal or talk or live amongst a more dominant culture. So before I get to those good questions, because I want to know how your guys' teenage years were like in America. So I was born in Mexico and I came here when I was 4. And 9 years later, I went back to Mexico and then I didn't come back until I was an adult. So I only lived as a child, as an adult. But I want to know what like that teenage years were. You guys got the American teenage years, which is so interesting. But before we get to that, we're going to talk a little bit about co-cultural theory. Now, this was a theory that I came across when I was in university. And I thought I was just stuck in another communication class. And I was like, man, I've taken so many of those. But it happened to be a communication class by Dr. Mark Orb, who is a behavior specialist as well as a creator of the co-culture theory. This theory stems from the fact that if you are from the non-dominant culture, you have to do a lot of things to have communication with the dominant culture. So let's talk about what the dominant culture is. The dominant culture is white, well-off, European American, non-disabled, heterosexual males. We know that, right? Pretty evident. And the co-cultured are in the US marginalized groups such as women, people of color, the economically disadvantaged, people with disabilities, the LGBTQ community, the very old, the very young, and the religious minorities. It's pretty much everybody else. This tends to be difficult, and he didn't want to call us minorities or inferior or subordinates, which, by the way, when you do become a resident or a citizen, you do see those words on your papers, including alien, which is just not the nicest words. So he said, let's call it co-culture instead of just minorities or inferiors or subordinates, right? And he created a 3x3 model called the communication orientation. This is why I found this super interesting. Because me not growing up here, and for you guys watching the podcast, you can actually see the picture on your screen. And the screen is a picture of 3x3 model. And on the left side, you have the word aggressive, assertive, non-assertive. And on the top part, you have separation, accommodation, and assimilation. So these are ways that co-culture people are able to have a communication with the dominant culture. On my end, I could tell you that at 15 years old, I was aggressive and completely separated. I attacked anything that was not my culture, not exactly everything, but anything that was white. And it's horrible. And I admit it because it was so wrong. I became a racist myself because I was just so sick of feeling less than, so people fuel the fire. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh man, I'm doing the same thing. I'm hating the same way I don't want them to hate. And it took a lot of years to help that and fix that. And I think I've become a more assertive and accommodative. So that way I can actually communicate, I can interact and intergroup with networking, I can use liaisons, and I can educate others. With that said, in this communication, I want to ask, and I want to start with Dio. I want to ask, has there been any moments where you thought, I have to assimilate or I need to be more like the dominant culture? Was there any moment in your childhood or in your teenage years where you were maybe kind of ashamed or shy about your culture?
Kind of, yeah. So growing up, I actually did not have a lot of Filipino friends, and the few Filipino friends I were able to make friends with, they're more of city folk, and my family, they're more of the up north, the countryside. So having the ability to relate to them, it was very difficult. And I felt like I found myself tying into more of the white culture. I had a lot of white best friends growing up, as I would call it. They were the ones who kind of introduced me to the American culture. And I felt like once I was introduced to the American culture, I had this weird urge to just avoid anything Filipino, anything Asian, anything that had to do with like not being America. And it felt weird just being ashamed of your culture. Like no one should ever be ashamed of who they are, I feel.
What about you, Ely? Did that happen to you at any time of your life?
So it's very interesting because the community that I was actually born and raised in Lenox, California, which is neighboring to Inglewood. It's a very, very small city. And everybody predominantly, it was Latinx. Everybody spoke Spanish. So for me, it was a different experience because I wasn't showcased, or I didn't know about the more dominant culture, unless I saw it in movies. Like I didn't see it in my neighborhood. I didn't see it in my community. So for me, I've always just had those cultural values, and it was very normal for me. But it was actually until I went off to college. I went to UC Santa Cruz, predominantly white campus. It's 6 hours away from LA. And so that's when I got a big culture shock because I wasn't around the same people that I was raised with. And so that was when at first I was like, whoa, like this is very different. Where do I fit in? And I did somehow started to figure that I had to assimilate to the dominant culture, or what ways can I be more appealing so I can be accepted more, right? And for me specifically, I tend to speak Spanglish, English and Spanish, or people tell me, oh, you have an accent. And I never realized that. That was something that I never thought about. And it wasn't until I went into an environment where there was a dominant culture. And so I think that's when I first experienced some form of assimilation, but I always was very proud of where I came from.
Great. It's tricky, and there's really no other way to show people what that is like unless you live it. Because Dio, I like what you said is true. You mainly saw more white culture, so of course you're going to kind of assimilate to that because that's what's being shown. And Ili, on the other side, you didn't have that at all until you went off to college, and now all of a sudden, you feel kind of out of place.
Yeah,
that's kind of difficult. So now, Ili, how do you feel as a school counselor, as an adult? Where do you feel that, maybe even in the 3x3 model, where do you fit in? Are you assertive? Are you non-assertive? Are you aggressive with your communication? And also, do you seek more of a separation of dominant culture, or to accommodate, or complete assimilation?
For me, I am very passionate about people celebrating their own culture, where they come from, their cultural values, their family values, their beliefs, right? Everything that encompasses culture. And even with the students that I work with, just for them to be proud of who they are, despite their background, despite their childhood, their personal experiences, just being really proud of who they are as people, what can they contribute to their community and ultimately to the world, right? And so I think for me, I've become a little bit more open-minded, and also having those really difficult discussions. And I think that's why culture is such a beautiful thing to talk about, because it's so broad. You can talk about it in different perspectives, in different subjects. And so just being able to have students, or have conversations with students, for example, about what's going on in the world right now, in our society, in our country, let's just specify, and seeing that there is a dominant culture, right? And I think as a school counselor now, coming into schools nowadays, it's a conversation that they're having more. It's more normalized. It's a conversation that's more normalized rather than when I was going to school. And so I think continuing to have those conversations with students, and and having them still celebrate who they are, what can they contribute, but still having, I think very important, still having those conversations with students.
Absolutely. I agree. And that's another reason I wanted to have Dio on, is because I met Dio because of his band. And I just loved his positivity. He was so positive. But what I also was intrigued about was his culture. And he didn't really share it as much, but as soon as I asked and I knew, I wanted to know everything. And Dio has become more open about it. So I want to know for you, Dio, now as well as an adult, how do you feel about your culture? Do you feel still kind of that need to assimilate? Are you still learning about it? Do you want it to be a part of who you are? How do you feel culturally right now?
Thankfully, I had the experience 3 years ago to go back to my family's area in the Philippines, to my grandmother's house. And for 3 weeks, I was learning to adapt to kind of the culture. I was exposed to all the food, all the arts, the city, the architecture, and it really opened my eyes. I'm glad I was able to go out to explore the Philippines. Everyone looked like me, and I was freaking out, whoa, you look like me. But it was really interesting. I feel like as an adult, I'm more open to accepting who I am as a person, both the American side, both the Asian side, both of all aspects of me. I'm able to accept all of that now.
I love that. I want to ask about before we go into the next part of health and wellness. I want to ask, this is a very specific moment in the life of immigrants or co-cultured. I wonder if it mimics your guys' experience. When you were kids, how was the healthcare experience? One, was it available to you? Did you have healthcare growing up? And two, do you ever remember being in a hospital and having to translate for your parents, or having just an awkward situation? Let's start with you, Ili.
Yeah, so healthcare was really not accessible for my family. I think for a lot of the members of my community, again, like I mentioned, it's a predominantly low-income community, predominantly Latinx and African American. And so growing up, like, I don't really remember even going to the doctor. I know it sounds really bad, but I don't have those memories, you know. And in terms of translating for my parents, like, there's been a lot of times where I did have to translate, and you know, if I had to call a bank or I had to call whatever, you know, but whatever translation I needed to do, I had to do that for my parents and for my grandparents as well. But in terms of healthcare, like, I honestly can't recall like really having that accessibility.
Hey, me neither, man. I just remember them telling us, like, don't get on a skateboard because if you fall, where are we going to take you?
Yeah.
Like, don't break bones, man. What about you, Dio?
I was very thankful and fortunate to have no issues with healthcare as a child because my mom was a healthcare worker. So healthcare was easily accessible to my family. And again, I'm very thankful for that. But I can't imagine other people having difficulties having access to healthcare.
Did you ever have to translate anything for your parents? Were your parents like, was their English on point, or did you ever have to help them out?
My mother's English was on point. My father sometimes had, I guess, difficulties with not to say that he's not a great English speaker, but it's very broken. It's very like, there are words that I could tell he wants to use, but he doesn't. There's no equivalent in English that he can use, if that makes sense.
It does. And it's really frustrating sometimes when I want to say something in Spanish that I just can't find the word in English, and it's just not the same. But same thing on your side. I was very fortunate because my mom's English was really good. She learned English back when she was in Mexico University, but my grandma didn't. And my grandma is a social butterfly. So she wanted to talk to everybody and she didn't care if they didn't understand her. So I was constantly, translating full conversations for her, but that was always fun. So talking about healthcare, I want to mention that in America, 14.7 million Asian communities. We have 14.7 million Asian communities, which means Cambodian, Chinese, Japanese, Korean, Vietnamese, Malaysian, Pakistan, Philippine Islands, and Thailand. And amazingly, well, not amazingly, it's not shocking, but it is a really interesting fact that Asian communities have low infant mortality, low incidence of cancer, low rates of homicide and suicide, which is fascinating. However, there is still a lot of poor health involved, and the reason is because of poor working conditions, affordability of healthcare or preventive care, linguistics, and cultural differences. So this is a big deal because once we go, let's say, into a hospital, maybe we were blessed with parents that knew some English or had us, but there is some instances where, let's say, from the Philippines or from Mexico, where they don't speak Tagalog or they don't speak Spanish. Maybe they speak Nahuatl, maybe they speak another dialect from the Philippines, and they go into a hospital and everything is just completely alien, right? Even from signing a piece of paper to communicating, that is so scary because how can we get people healthcare if linguistics aren't even there? And also thinking about cultural differences. So many of us know that maybe in our household we practice not so Western medical practices, and healthcare has to be involved in cultural diversity so that we can also talk to people that we want to care for, not only in the Western way. When it comes to Latinx communities, there's over 50.5 million communities, which includes Mexico, Puerto Rico, Cuba, Latin America, and Central America. Latinx does have high infant mortality, high incidence of cancer, high incidence of homicide and suicide. In our poor health, the reason being socioeconomic factors, poor working conditions, affordability of healthcare, linguistics, and cultural differences. So we know that as Latinos, we do have a long way to go in many places, including healthcare. So wellness really interferes in cultural diversity. I want to ask, and let's start with Dio. Did you ever suffer any emotional or mental or anything instability or wellness due to any kind of racial discrimination or due to just kind of your culture in general on either side?
Yeah, I felt like due to a lack of connection, like I had a hard time finding role models or other kids that kind of looked like me. So I had a big difficulty just connecting with the other kids, and I felt like it turned me into the stereotypical shy Asian kid, or it turned me into like the lone wolfer, where I just didn't mind being by myself because I kind of understood myself more than other kids because they just couldn't relate to what my culture was.
Isn't it wild how important it is, even just physical attributes are when you grow up in a place where maybe a lot of things, people you look up to, or even superheroes, they don't look like you, or princesses from Disneyland, maybe you don't
Yeah.
look like them. And it's a trip, because you're saying that actually really affected you because people looked at you different just because of your physical attributes. Did that feel, as you got older, or your American teenage years, did that make you feel any wellness instability or any like depression, anxiety, or anything like that, Dio?
Yeah, it's scary. I didn't know what was going on with me. I thought I was just going through whatever, but they ended up taking me to a to a regular checkup, and I went through kind of like a mental health routine, and I was diagnosed with depression at 12 years old. Like that's really young for someone to have depression off of that. And it kind of opened my eyes just to see like I'm not sure if it was tied in with the whole culture thing, but I feel like a lot of it had to do with just not being able to fit in, not being able to find again people that have physical traits like I do. Like I felt very lost, very out of the world.
And it's hard to know whether it was or wasn't, but it is a struggle, man. I remember going to school, and I was into American culture too, like the Spice Girls and stuff. But specifically, like from like third grade to sixth grade, I was really into novelas because my grandma watched novelas. So I was like I would dress like some of the characters there, and then I would get to school and no one knew what I was talking about because I was in it was majority of white and Asian community. So you do feel out of place because you like, I like American culture, but maybe I like my other part more, and you didn't know how to share it. What about you, Ili? Did you ever find yourself suffering from any kind of wellness instability due to that?
So the moment I can think about is a very impactful moment in my life. My parents divorced when I was 11 years old, so I was fairly young, and I have two younger siblings. And so that came with a lot of emotional and mental instability. But I didn't know who to talk to. I didn't know who to express how I was feeling, what I was going through. You have your friends. I had really good friends that I was able to express some feelings and some thoughts, but that's all I had. That's all the support that I had. And so my dad moved out, and that was really hard. And then my mom became a single mom, and now it was a single mom raising three kids. And so for me, I think about that moment a lot because I didn't know anything about, counseling, therapy, any other type of supports that I may or should have received while I was in school, or just other type of supports within my family, maybe, and I think not talking about mental and emotional resources and wellness overall, right, within my culture and my community, I think it can be very detrimental. And I think that I could have definitely benefited from that extra support. I think now as an adult, I finally seek therapy, and it was life-changing. And so I think that's one of those moments in my life that I felt that there was definitely a lack of support.
I like that you brought up a lack of support, because that's very true. That's actually one of the reasons why I left back, because I was getting bullied in junior high and I was getting beat up. And it was because I couldn't fit in. So I didn't fit in with anybody. And the Mexican people in my junior high were mad at me because I didn't look like them. So what I did was I tried to fit in. I did. I Sharpied on the eyebrows, and I did the lipstick, and I got into some trouble with them. And it just, again, Ili, same thing. You'd go, and there was no school counselor, and there was no one who could help you. My mom called the cops, and the cops told her, well, if they're fighting inside the school and it's from both sides, we can't do anything about it. And I was like, it's not from both sides. I'm getting my ass beat. Like, what? There's no support where you can go to. So thank you for becoming a school counselor. That's a huge deal. That's going to change a lot of lives.
Yeah,
So,
and that's definitely one of the parts, one of the many parts where it really just kept me, motivated to go into this profession as well.
I love it. So before we get to the fun part of culture, because there's such a fun part without the politics, there's food and literature and music and art, and that's what makes everything positive and wonderful. I'm going to ask you guys, if you could, for anyone that's listening that has gone through something like you did, whether that was socially, culturally, or for any reason felt like they didn't fit in or any kind of instability, let's start with Dio. What would you tell them?
I'd say find activities that you could do alone, but are also possible to do with other people. So, for example, sports, skateboarding, hiking, anything art related, anything to express yourself, as long as you get that connection, because that's what loneliness is basically a lack of connection. So if you're able to connect to, say, a bike or connect with nature, that'll help a lot with if you're having a hard time connecting socially or culturally.
I love it. What about you, Ili? What would you say?
So every year of your life is going to be different, and just learning to love and accept yourself as you continue through different areas of your life, different just overall just different developmental stages of your life, to just learn to, and it comes with time, right? Because even me as an adult, I'm still learning to love and care for myself and really be proud of who I am. So taking those steps to really learning and loving yourself and who you are as a person, what you really can contribute and take place in this life. And like Dio mentioned, finding something that you are super interested in. It can be culturally, it can be not culturally, but just really finding something that you're passionate about. For example, when I went off to college, like I had mentioned, there's not a big Latinx community, and so I ended up joining a dance troupe, and we used to get together and dance like all these different genres, and that was my family away from home. So even if you are not an adult, you're younger, being able to find something that you're very interested in or that you're passionate about is super important.
I love it. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I just want to tell people, whoever's listening or watching, that you can also make things happen. If you find yourself like you don't fit in, like no one looks like you, make it up. If you don't see any superheroes that look like you, make up a superhero that looks like you. If you don't see anyone sitting in your local council that looks like you, strive to get to that council. So remember that you do have a lot of power. And at the end, we're all just people. We're just human beings, and it would be so much nicer if we could just celebrate each other's culture and even maybe adopt some customs without having that ethnocentric mindset that yours is the right one, right? Or that yours is the best, because they're all beautiful. So let's talk about the fun stuff. I want to know a little bit, and I want to share it with the people watching and listening, a little bit of more Filipino and Mexican culture. So Dio, tell us about your favorite traditional food or dish from the Philippines.
Okay, so there's this amazing thing called lumpia, and if you've never heard of it before, pause the podcast, go Google it, go to DoorDash, find. Basically, it's a spring roll with a savory or sweet fillings, and it is arguably the most requested dish of Filipino culture. Whenever I'm going to a party, everyone's requesting, "Oh, tell your mom to bring lumpia. Oh, bring the lumpia." And I'm like, I can't. I'm sorry, guys, I can't. But it is an experience.
Any local restaurant? I mean, I know you're in the Bay Area, but any local restaurants around your area that has bomb Filipino food?
There's this place in Millbrae, San Bruno called Patio Filipino, and interesting enough, one of the chefs there used to work with my mom, so we used to frequent there a lot. But they have a lechon, which is roast pig, sisig, which is vegetables and pork, minced pork, pancit, yeah, there we go, pancit, which is noodles, Filipino noodles. So Patio Filipino, I'd highly recommend them in San Bruno, Nobre.
Dang, you're making me hungry now because Filipino
I
food is
know.
bomb. And lechon is good. We have the same thing with lechon, and that's actually delicious. I love pork. What about you, Ili? What's one of your favorite Mexican dishes?
That is such a hard question to answer because there's just way too many dishes. I'm gonna say it's between flautas and carne en su jugo, which a lot of people probably haven't heard of. Flautas is what they call like taquitos made out of chicken or potato. And then carne en su jugo is like this big stew. You can add meat, beef, bacon, beans, cilantro. It's so amazing, and I can't choose. Like it's just so difficult to choose between those two.
Do you where is that actually from? Because I don't think I've actually had carne en su jugo.
I believe it's from Jalisco. Yeah, my
Ooh.
mom makes it very traditional, and it's amazing.
Nice. That's bomb. Well, it is hard. It's hard to say because I mean, I love tacos. I'll have any kind of tacos. Tacos al pastor with a little pineapple on top, which is so legit. And mole, dark mole with chocolate, which is like a chocolate sauce that you can have on chicken, on turkey, which we actually first used to have it on snake. That's the most authentic way to have it. And it's pretty bomb. It's pretty bomb. Ili, any place locally that you would recommend Mexican food?
So I actually just moved to a new city, and due to COVID, we haven't been able to really venture out. So no, I haven't really tried any Mexican place. Honestly, it's really hard to even find a good Mexican place, regardless of where you're at. So I would just go to my mom's house and just have some delicious homemade Mexican food there.
There's nothing like going back home. This is my rule of thumb. It's actually JP, my fiance's rule of thumb, but it's really good. If the taco costs more than like $1.75, don't do it. Tacos should not be $2. They shouldn't be $2.50. That's crazy. And you want to go to a place that says like taqueria, right? You don't want to go to just a place that kind of says Mexican food. Go to a place that maybe doesn't look great because those are the best places. I know that for us locally here around the Westminster, Stanton, Garden Grove, Anaheim area, there's a place called Lagunilla Tacos, Lagunilla, and they're legit like Mexico City food, and it is bomb. So if you guys are out there, definitely check it out. What about art, musicians, any bands, any Filipino bands out there, Dio, that we should listen to, or any artists that we should check out?
Off the top of my head, I know the thrash metal band Death Angel. They used to be all Filipino at one point. They're from Daly City, California, it's like Little Manila. There are so many Filipino people over there.
Oh, that's awesome. All right, so a Filipino thrash band. That's pretty rad. What about you, Ili? Any music, any artist, anything that you like from Mexico?
I am a hardcore Maná fan since I was very young. I've actually been to a couple of their concerts, and it's awesome. Just what they sing about, their music overall is amazing. And then some other genres like Banda MS or Banda El Recodo are other good bands you can definitely listen. That's more traditional Mexican.
But I like that you brought up Maná, which is cool because a lot of people don't know that we have a crazy good Spanish rock genre. I'm gonna go to the most debated like big Spanish bands is Maná and my favorite Café Tacuba. So you guys should definitely check out those bands, Maná, MANA, and Café Tacuba. Actually, let's see if my producer can show up some pictures right now about Café Tacuba and Maná. But definitely check it out because we have so much to give in our countries. It's much more than what we think. And while we look at that, have you guys come across with your own like music, like certain instruments or something from your particular culture that you really like? Maybe Dio?
I might have to think about that for a minute.
Yeah, because I don't know if there is, but I was just wondering, like any instruments or something specific to the Philippines musically, which I'm like from where I'm from, Veracruz, it's the harp. A lot of people play the harp. And a lot of people play the, let's see those pictures. That's Café Tacuba. Y'all should check them out. They're really amazing. They're really rad. If you're actually watching the podcast, you'll see a picture of them. If not, check them out, Café Tacuba on Spotify. And Maná also, because they are like it in Mexico. They're one of the hugest rock bands. So yes, I was saying we play the harp and we also play the, I can't believe, the jarana, which is like son jarocho. It's like very classical. It's very authentic Veracruz music, and it's like a tiny little guitar. It's almost like a ukulele. So I don't know, it's interesting from there. Anything with you, Iliana, like any dancing, anything folklore that you like?
So we dance a lot of banda. We dance a lot of cumbia. Those are very big in my family. If I ever go to any family party, we are always dancing, actually, to any type of Spanish music. And we embrace it and we love it. And I think that's one of the things that we really value a lot, is that it really brings like our family together, and we're just able to have a good time.
I love it. Now, let me ask one thing. So, one thing you love about your culture, and one thing that sometimes you get really embarrassed about it, and one thing you love about American culture, and one thing you get embarrassed about that. Let's go, Ili first, and we'll get Dio to think a little bit on that one.
So on my Mexican side, I don't know, I just love I love a lot of aspects of my Mexican culture: the food, the people, the family values. I'm very, very close to my immediate family, so I think that has to do a lot with my culture. One thing that is kind of embarrassing is some of the machismo that still is happening within our Mexican culture, which is something that we have to combat and have conversations about. But that's something that it's still work in progress. And my American culture, I think I value, even though in today's society it's just we're just going through a lot as a society, with everything that's going on. But I think one thing that I really am proud is that there's just so many different types of people that can come together, despite their background, despite what the language that they speak, and just really be inclusive of other people. And so that's something that makes me really proud, and something that embarrasses me from this, from the American culture is, it's kind of ironic. It's the opposite of that. It's the fact that there is still a very dominant, group of people, and there's a very marginalized group of people, and there's a very distinguished line between both. And so, as much as we want to be able to, become that melting pot, or become very cultural, or become very diverse, I feel like we still have a lot of work to do as well.
Absolutely, I agree. What about you, Dio?
I could say one thing for sure is that Filipinos love to party. They love to celebrate. They love Christmas. They love birthdays. There are three things that are guaranteed in a Filipino home or a Filipino party. There will always be food. There will always be karaoke, and there will always be love. Filipinos, they take care of each other without expecting anything in return. And I think that's a beautiful thing. There are no leftovers at a Filipino party. You're going to go home with bags full of spaghetti. That's a weird thing, but you'll understand it in the Filipino culture.
What's one thing that might be embarrassing, and then your American side?
Something embarrassing, although it's not a negative thing, is that it's very hard for parents to let go of their kids. Like, they love their kids. I have memories when I was 19 out on the town, and it'd be 1 a.m. I'd get a phone call from my mom saying like, "Oh, where are you? It's 1 a.m." And I'm like, "Mom, I'm 19. It's Friday. Do the math, please." So I think a lot of the Filipino families, they're very connected with their kids. They're very what's the word? They're very overprotective of their kids, and it's not a bad thing at all. It's just sometimes it's kind of embarrassing, and I don't mind at all, honestly. Something with the American side, I love how diverse it is, especially here in the Bay Area, where on the same block I can get Indian food, Mexican food. I can get like any food that pretty much exists. It could probably be found here in the Bay Area. And something I'm not so big on the American culture is kind of like the sports. It's probably just me, but I see some people, they get real violent, they get real rowdy over the sports. I'm like, cool, but tone it down just a little bit.
I love that. I did not think you were going to say that, but that's true. Sometimes it's a little too much. I totally feel you on that. Well, for me, I absolutely love the Mexican part of unity, of kindness. Everyone is so nice to each other, even if you don't know each other. I remember going to Mexico for the first time, living there, and everyone says hi to you. Everyone wants to talk to you. Everyone's so kind. And I love that even within our family or our Latinx communities here. There's just like a level of, you feel close to them. You feel like they're part of your family, even without knowing them. And that's really beautiful. I think a negative side, or sometimes that it's just like, is that we tend to be really stubborn. So we don't change very easily, even when it's really important for us to do so. It's very scary to accept change, and whether that's maybe not having your whole family live together, or letting, like Dio said, your grown-up kid be a grown-up. A lot of things change is definitely difficult. One thing I love about my American side is the fighting spirit. I think American innovation and fighting is just amazing. I love to see that when there is injustice or inequality, even like we're looking at right now, people stand up and they fight. And I can't tell you how much I've tried in my own country for that to happen. So just to see that spirit, even, I mean, whatever side, but the fact that you're fighting for something you believe in is quite majestic. And the side that I don't like is the greed. I don't like that everything is about capital, everything is about money. I believe that we should live in a world where if you're a musician, if you're an artist, you should be getting paid by the government to do so. I mean, if you were Aristotle or Socrates or Einstein, you should be getting paid to think. So I think that greed and that capitalism is something that hopefully will change, but I think it should. But yeah, that is awesome, guys. I want to thank you guys. And before we get going, though, I just really want to thank you, because it's not easy talking about this, especially during our climate. We're always kind of concerned whether we're going to say the wrong thing or the right thing. And I want people listening to know that here you can say anything. And I mean it, even if it's on the other side, as some people might think, or it might be offensive, because we all grow up. If I was the same person I was 10 years ago, oh my God, I said so many things that I shouldn't have said. But now I'm here and I'm honest about it, and I'll back up that people can change, and that's very important. And be proud of where you come from. Be proud of what you look like, no matter what your culture is or your ethnicity is, because man, we're all awesome. So Dio, give us some plugs. What are you up to? What are you doing? Where can we find you? Where can we find your music? Where can we do anything with Dio?
So my band Stray Rebel Bullet, we're actually working on our second album, and it's going to have significantly more Dio. So all the scary parts of Dio, it's probably going to be in that music, all that. You can find us online on Spotify.
Oh, we got it.
Okay, there we go.
Don't worry about you. We got you on the plugs. And
thank you.
Tell me a little bit more about the art you were doing, because I want to bring up that you're doing something really cool about positivity. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us your art side?
I am, but it's like very, very low key. Like it doesn't even have a name to it. So I'm just doing a bunch of mental health related art pieces. So for example, one of the pieces is it's called imposter syndrome, and that's something that a lot of individuals face, where they feel like they don't deserve their rewards or accolades. And it's just an image of someone kind of removing their face, saying like, I'm not who I am. And it's very grim. It's very grotesque, but I feel like it's how a lot of people feel, especially with cultural diversity, where they don't feel how they look. So I want to do a lot of mental health related art pieces and just throw them on shirts. And again, it doesn't have a name to it, so I'm not throwing any plugs yet, but it's something I'm very excited to work on.
Well, please keep us posted, because since the moment of conception when we were talking about it, it's just such a nice thing. And you're such a positive dude, man. You're just such a positive dude.
Thank you.
And I really appreciate that. We need more positivity in this world. So definitely, if you're listening, if you're watching, check out Stray Rebel Bullet. These are fantastic musicians. And all I can say is their music is full of color. And yes, it's metal. Give it a chance if you haven't heard metal, because there's some good shit out there. And Stray Rebel Bullet is one of those bands. What about you, Illy?
And I just want to say, Dio, now that I hear you, working on this new project, we should definitely collaborate. I'm pretty sure that a lot of my students would really, be super appreciative and really would like to work with something like this. So maybe we should definitely connect. I do want to give a big shout out to Instabella. You can find them on Instagram. It is a small business. The person who actually runs this business was one of my classmates, and so she's another school counselor. And I actually want to give another shout out to there are another music band as well, and one of the he is a drummer. He was my high school teacher, and you can find them at De Ladrones Música on Instagram as well.
Oh, nice. De Ladrones Música. I like it. Thank you so much, Ili. And same thing, you can find Iliana on Instagram. You can find Iliana on LinkedIn. She is a school counselor, and she's just a really wonderful, strong Latinx woman. We need more like her. So if you guys need any advice, just need someone to talk to. She is just such a wonderful person. So definitely check out Ili out. Check Dio out, guys. Thank you so much for hanging out with me, for talking about cultural diversity. This means the world to me, because even before wellness, even before behavior, before fitness, and even before politics, culture was my most favorite thing in the whole wide world. And I just want people to feel connected, to know that we are all human, but we're all different. And that makes us awesome because we have so much to share. And that could be in arts and food and everything else. So if you're out there and you're from the dominant culture listening, it's nothing against you, man. I also want to celebrate your culture. I just want us all to feel more equality and to feel safe enough to show you also what we have to offer. Because these countries that a lot of people call third world have so much to offer. Don't be scared to travel. Don't be scared to visit the Philippines, to visit Mexico, to visit other countries that you would have never imagined, because they have art, they have culture, they have music, they have love, just like America, just like anywhere else. All right, guys? So thank you so much, Dio. Thank you so much, Iliana. Everyone have a happy MLK Day, and I will see you next time here on the Wellness of Madness podcast. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.